Then, next presentation, Startups from an Engineer's Perspective by Johan Bevemyr. Hello and welcome, Johan.
Hello.
Yes, it's so fun that we first had like an investor's perspective and now we get the engineer's perspective. Will we hear the same story or will we hear another story?
Some of that will probably be you play. Some of
And you will tell us like, be careful which VC you go with.
Yeah, partly.
Yeah, okay. Yeah,
Partly.
thank you. The stage is yours.
Right, thank you. So my perspective is slightly different from Jane's, I think. I've been working with Jane in a couple of startups, and that has been great. But I haven't done as many as she has, but I've been more involved in them, in actually writing code and stuff like that. So it takes longer for me. Maybe some background first, so you know where I'm coming from. I've been programming for a long time. I started in the early 1980s on the first home computer that I got my hands on, and started writing computer games that we tried to sell on cassette tapes, which was a medium of the time. And I continued programming. I really loved that, and studied at Uppsala University, where I eventually, after a lot of fun, ended up with a PhD in computer science. I was working with Prolog implementation at that point, parallel program Prolog implementation, and met up with my supervisor, and we were asked to start a lab at Ericsson. Or he was asked and I was asked in turn if I wanted to join him there. And that lab turned out to be the sister lab of CS Lab, which is where Erlang was invented. And we know that, of course, since we had been working with them. Erlang sort of originated or were inspired by Prolog, and we had been looking at their problems and sought inspiration from their sort of real applications. At Ericsson, we met Jane, and since Ericsson decided that Erlang wasn't the right choice for them, we decided to start our own company and try to exploit what we thought were the really new and exciting technology found in Erlang. And it turned into a number of companies where we have used Erlang as a competitive advantage, or one of the really core technologies. We haven't only used Erlang, but we have used it where we think it made sense, and I think it has been one of the things that made it possible for us to succeed. So we did Bluetail and Klarna together with Jane, and then we started Tailf, that was acquired by Cisco about 5 years ago. We spent almost 10 years building Tailf, and now about a year ago we started a new company called Avassa, which does cloud for the edge, or edge cloud management technology. When Tailf was acquired by Cisco, we brought Erlang into the Cisco core after some time. So nowadays, a lot of Cisco equipment actually ships with an Erlang engine inside it, running Erlang code. And I ended up as a district engineer at Cisco, which was really interesting. These large companies, both Ericsson and Nortel, that we ended up at after Bluetail and Cisco, they're interesting in many ways. But one of the interesting aspects of them is that they have a really good perspective of where the market is going, and they have really good visions of where things are happening. They are not that good at executing, in my experience, but they are interesting places to be to see where get a glimpse of the future, in a sense. Now I have some other things going. I'm industrial advisor at Fairpoint Capital, which is one of the venture capital funds in Stockholm, in Sweden. They're mostly active in the Nordics, and also member of the investment committee of a company called Avassa, which invests in research projects, more or less. But it's not really from that perspective I'm talking today. So what I'm going to try to present today is the process we've been using for starting companies, and what it has ended up looking like after now 4 iterations. And there are many different ways to do startups, but this is what we have been using. My perspective on what we have been using. I'll try to walk you through the different parts and things that I can think of that might be relevant. I'm leaving a lot of things out, of course. It's hard to cover in a short speech. All from idea, which Jen covered beautifully. Team, funding. When you start, what do you think about then? Build your first product, how to get that shipped into the hands of customer. If you need additional funding, which you may not always need, but we have in general needed some more funding above the seed funding. And then how we have been growing the company after that, and then finally managed to sell most of the companies in an exit. So Jan had a really good presentation on how to generate ideas, and trying to find an idea that solves a problem that is painful is really key, as Jan said, and it's really right that customers generally try to avoid buying from startups. There must be a really painful problem that you're solving for them to do it. Otherwise, it's just too large a risk, because startups, they die or they get acquired by a competitor, and they can no longer use a product that they want. We have tried to get around this in various ways. Sometimes it's been fruitful to promise the customers that they can have the source code, or contractually promise them that even if we get acquired or even if we go bankrupt, you will still have access to the technology we are selling you. So we have put our code in escrow, for example, to ensure that if something bad happens to our company, they would still have access to the source code. But the loop we have been iterating is essentially this: come up with an idea, find some unique selling points or pain points that you solve with this idea, and figure out if someone else has already tried this or are currently doing the exact same thing. And that may take a lot of time, especially if there are small companies which are hard to find. If you end up with an idea, you try it out with a bunch of, or we have been trying it out with potential customers, as many as we could find, but generally 2 or 3, 1, 2, 3, whatever. And if we couldn't find any potential customers, we've sort of tried the idea out on people experts in the field that would know the market. And tech-wise, we of course have to ask ourselves whether we can build it or not, and do we have something unique that we can contribute, and is it difficult enough? If it is difficult enough, in many cases we think, or it has been the case, that we have invented interesting new technologies. But if it's not difficult enough, you have to compete in some other way, and you have a problem for many reasons. It will be hard to get someone to invest in your technology if it's not, or your idea, if it's not difficult enough, because then someone could just copy it. We also looked at the team to see whether the idea actually plays to our strengths. And we have abandoned quite a few ideas because we realize that this is not really the kind of problem we're really good at solving. And also, will it be fun to do? Is this a fun project to do? If you're going to do it for 10 years, 15 years, it has to be fun, at least initially. But then the definition of fun is maybe a bit different between people. We tend to like challenges, but it can very well be in a fairly boring setting. That's fine. The really exciting fields of sort of product fields, they tend to be a bit overcrowded. So we have found it better to find ideas that lives in an environment where many people find it boring. And as Jane mentioned, how does it fit into current trends? Is it already overhyped, or will it be overhyped? We tried to stay away from those. We like a bit of a hype because it has helped us to build momentum around our technology. And if you can jump on it early enough, and if it's not sort of overwhelming like AI or something like that, you can ride it for a bit. But if you get in too early or get in too late into the hype, or if the hype turns out to be too big, like AI, then it might be very hard to compete, and it will be hard to compete for money and for talent and in the market. So we've tried to stay away from that. A bit of hype is really good, or especially if you can build your hype yourself, or hook on to hype and try to build momentum around it. And we also look at what this is going to look like in 5 years' time. Where do we think that the field will go? Will this be relevant in a few years' time? Having said that, it's really easy to shoot down ideas. I think, at least in our team, we have been more prone to shooting down ideas than to jump on them too eagerly. And we also found that, as I said, once we engage, innovation tends to come if the problem is difficult enough, or if it turns out to be a more difficult problem than we initially thought. And as I briefly mentioned, there is a risk of thinking that large companies are more of a competition than they actually are. We have found. So from being inside quite a few large companies, we've seen what the process looks like when they have really good ideas and they know where the market is going, but they are fairly poor at executing. And the reason for that is, well, it's various reasons. But one of them is that they have usually huge baggage of existing products that they want to cram into this new thing they're trying to build. And there are teams that get thrown together to build this new thing, and it usually doesn't work all that well. So they're not very, very quick. So we have found that you usually don't have to be too concerned with competition for big companies. It's more of a concern if there are other startups or smaller companies that are quicker. Quite the contrary, actually, with large companies. If you can build something that they are trying to build and failing, it might be a good exit strategy as well. Or you may sell the technology to them. Now, the other side of this, which I have only been partly involved in, is evaluating what the business side is of the idea. Is there a market for this idea, for this product, for this service? Is it large enough to build a company around that can have a valuation that is interesting in when we have captured a reasonable size of the market? And who are the customers? And can we reach them? As Jane said, if there are just 1 or 2 customers, it might be tricky. but anyway, you have to identify the customers, and you have to think about how you can reach them. Do you have the access to the right channels? If they are the same customers that you worked with before, it's easier, right? Then you have probably good access to the right people at the companies that are going to buy your product. And that's what we have partly been trying to do. And you have to look at the competition. What is out there? So once you've decided that, hey, this idea actually survived all these difficult things, these difficult tests, you have a winner. And if you have more than one, you're really lucky. A few words about Erlang. I fully agree with Jane said about the strengths of Erlang. We have been using Erlang in a lot of our projects, companies, for a number of reasons. And I think initially when we started Bluetail, Erlang was just it didn't exist outside Ericsson. We helped make it open source and make it available outside Ericsson. But at that point, it was really something new and different, and we thought we could explore that advantage that we found in that. And the interesting thing with Erlang was that it originated from the telecom industry, from Ericsson, where they had these telephony switches that they needed to program efficiently. They had a C++ project that failed miserably, and they had a lot of specific custom-built hardware processors that execute the programs in a fairly specific way. They could support many concurrent processes and be fault tolerant and stuff like that. So when they invented Erlang, they wanted to create a language that would both handle many concurrent sessions. It was designed for high reliability. A telephony switch is allowed to be down a few minutes a year. So you need to be able to upgrade software at runtime. You need to be able to isolate crashes and all of that. So they designed that into the language. And what a telephony switch is mainly protocol processing of many concurrent sessions. So it's really useful or suited for protocol processing. It's multiprocessor built for multiprocessor friendliness or for multiprocessor execution from the start. And they very, very purposely designed Erlang as a language without pointers and without shared memory for concurrency. And they looked at logic programming languages and functional languages and compared that to writing the same problem in another imperative language like C or Pascal, which they were using at the time at Ericsson, and decided that functional programming really had a huge advantage in the size of the programs. And all of these things turned out to be really great also for internet-like applications, which was just, I guess, a coincidence more or less. So we have used that strength to build applications that are sort of modern, that has the same kind of that need the same kind of solutions as the old telecom switches did. All right, so if we look at the founding team, one of the things that we have more or less established is that we tend to work with people that we have worked with before, not necessarily founded companies with before, but at least worked with before, so we know how they function. We have found that if you just know someone socially, that's usually not enough to know how it is to work with them, even if they are really nice. But when we embark on a project like this, it's really important that the founding team works well together. And Otherwise, it's easy to get into conflicts, and that is what breaks many startups, I think. And some things needs to be agreed on at the start with fund, at least for us. What the goal is of the company. In our case, it has been to sell the company and make money. And if you have that as a goal, other things fall out from that. But there are other reasons to start companies. It could be to have fun or to attack interesting problems, but not necessarily care about making the company commercially very successful. But for our purposes, we found that it sort of coincides. If it's successful commercially, it's usually because we're building the right thing, and that is also fun. And what we also want to agree on what the exit looks like in 5-10 years time. What are we striving for? Is it to sell the company an IPO? Is it a tech exit, or is it to generate income over time? Just be a generally profitable company that we can live on for the rest of our lives. You have to figure out what the salaries are going to be. Otherwise, that might be a source of conflict. How to divide the shares when you start the company. How much you're going to work. So if you are a professor, for example, you may want to spend time teaching or doing research, and you spend some time at the startup. And that has to be established from the start if that's the goal. And also how much time you give the startup. So you agree between yourselves that we're going to give this 5 years, or 2 years, or 3 years, or whatever you agree on. But that has to be. Now it's usually for longer. But if it doesn't work, or if you decide that I want to do something else, it should be an option for doing that. And we formalize this in a shareholder agreement. So once we've done that, we start looking for funding. And to get some funding, either from ourselves or from some angel investor, we have a few things we need to figure out. What are the intellectual property situation in the company? Do we own everything we need, or do we have we secured it? Maybe we have patents for it, or at least someone else doesn't own the IP that we rely on. We look at the risks. You of course have to decide what the valuation is, or you have to agree with the founders or the investors how much the company is going to be valuated at. You need some kind of plan for both for yourself and also for the investor, to see what are we going to use with what are we going to do with this money. It's useful, maybe not so much for actually following up on that in terms of hey, you didn't reach this mile point, now I want my money back or something. But it's really good to have a goal to work towards. And of course things happen, so maybe you didn't reach that milestone, but there was a good reason for it, or there were some other things that happened. And we also, if the seed funding isn't enough, and sometimes you know that from the start, you have to look at what do we need to achieve to get additional funding. How much money do we actually need in order to secure Series A funding, for example? Will the money we are getting from ourselves or for our angel investor actually be enough to get us to that point? And it might be that you get the money in tranches, that you get some money first, and when you reach a milestone you get some more money, which is fine. In our case, we have been able to contribute some of the seed funding ourselves. And that can be done in different ways. You can either work without pay, or you can contribute some funds. or you bring on an angel investor, and it should be someone that you work well with, of course, because you're going to work really closely with them, and that brings something into the company that is useful and complements whatever you are contributing. So once you have secured that, you have agreed on what you want to do, you have some money in the bank, and you have actually started the company, or you have quit your other engagements, which is sort of a milestone in itself, that everyone in the team has actually quit their old jobs or whatever they were doing. And you sit together and in this new office, or you work to, now these days, work over Zoom, or some other thing like that. You now are ready to move towards move forward with your product. So what does it look like? Well, first of all, you need to validate your business case, that it's actually going to be what you think it was going to be. You need to find some pilot customers, at least if you have sort of a kind of products we have been building. So you need someone to do that. You need to secure your IP. If you don't have it, you have to ensure that all the contracts with some subcontractors and whatnot ensures that you as a company owns the IP that is produced. And of course, you need to set up your software development environment, like repositories, CI/CD pipelines, and all of that. All that involves building a product and support organization and delivery organization. And you need to decide, or we have needed to decide, what the delivery strategy is for the product. So it's just not enough to build a really cool software or product. You also have a way. You need to have a way to get it to the customer, whether it's an actual app that you sell as an installable software or as a downloadable app or something, or whether it's a service or a platform as a service or something like that. And usually we have built a prototype to figure these things out. So the goals of building a prototype have been a few different goals. We usually want to use it to figure out where the difficult parts are. If there are things that we don't already know how to solve, we need to drill down and try to find solutions, or at least ways around them. We need to figure out what the right technology is for the particular problem. As I said, we've been using Erlang, but not exclusively. We have used a lot of other languages as well. In many, I think all cases, the core technology or the core of the product has always boiled down to being written in Erlang. The complicated logic has been written in Erlang, but we have written a lot of C and Java and Python and some Rust and some all sort of things. Since Erlang is a bit somewhat of the technology, when we started our first company, or both Bluetail and Tailf actually, we didn't even tell our customers we were using Erlang. We thought it would scare them away, and that fear has gone away as Erlang has become more popular, at least, or more well known. So when we started Tailf, we didn't say that we were using Erlang, so we provided C and Java and Python APIs instead. But over time, we got customers that were excited about Erlang, and we provided an Erlang API as well. So the prototype, we use that to find the right technology, find out where we need to invent, and also to kind of scope it out, to see what are the real size of this problem, and what kind of competences are we missing. when we started Avassa, we knew from the start that we would need a web UI team, and we didn't have the competence ourselves. So one of the first hires we made was to hire a really great web UI developer, front-end developer that had experience from our domain. And part of this prototype has also often been to figure out what kind of open source we can use. Of course, we do use a lot of open source, but some of the open source that's out there is not. Well, it depends on what you're going to use it for. If it's going to be the core of your technology or your offering, your product, you're probably going to have to support it and extend it and fix bugs in it. And so you really need to understand it well. Some of the open source, or most of the open source, you don't have to touch at all. Like the Erlang engine, for example, we rarely do anything with that. But other parts we have decided to re-implement ourselves or implement versions of some of the available open source stuff that was better suited to our problem domain, since we knew that we would have to own that source or own that code in the sense that we would have to fully support it towards our customers and extend it for new requirements. And this prototype is also great for showing to potential customers and also to investors if they are sort of for the next round of financing. So after having decided or built the prototype, the next step has usually been to try to figure out what a minimal viable product is. What is the least or the essential features of this product that we need to have included in our first product we send to a customer? So we just try to strip away everything that's not necessarily part of the MVP. So we have something that we can ship to customers, something that we can demo and get feedback on. So we've had to get something out to the customers and that they can start to explore. The products we've been building have been of the kind that the customer usually have to set a few things up before they can start using the product. They have to allocate resources to work with it to start with. They have to allocate hardware, maybe set up labs and stuff like that. So even if the product isn't the final product, it's really good to get something out there that they can start playing with, and that does useful things. But it doesn't have to be everything that you want to build in the end. The stuff that you sort of strip out of the product, you put that on the roadmap, and that shows them where you are going with the product. And the feedback we get from customers help us prioritize on that roadmap. Some of the stuff we probably want to move up, and some of the stuff we maybe not ever implement at all. So if you need Series A funding that we have been needing, we realize that there are a few things that we need to get ready in order to be able to get any funding. There are no really hard rules for this, but in my experience, there are a few things that really helps you establish funding. And having an MVP ready and delivered to some customers and proven in the market is really useful. That way, a potential investor can talk to those customers and validate whether the product or the service actually solves the problem that they have, that it's a springing problem, it's a painful problem that it solves. Without that, it's harder to get funding. we also need a plan for what to do for the next 2-3 years, similar to what we had when we started the company, but with more detailed plans and milestones and so on. Plan for what we're going to use the money for. Whether it's going to be for scaling up sales or engineering or marketing or establishing a new market, maybe start selling in the US or parts of Europe or something like that. But really a good plan is essential, I think. Also something that might not be obvious, at least it wasn't to me. It should have been, but it wasn't. And that's that the original founders and any additional investors, or if you have an angel investor, they need to participate in some way in this new round of funding. If they don't, it's a warning sign to the investor. So you have to save some funds. It doesn't have to be all that much. If you're a founder and you're generally don't have all that much money, the investor will understand that. But it's a really good sign that you're willing to put up funds that are scarce to you, and you believe in the future of the company. If you don't, then that will be a huge warning sign. An investor would also want to see a projection of your growth. What is this company going to look like? It's all going to be hockey sticks, of course, but still there needs to be a believable progression of the company over time. And it needs to be an interesting result towards the end of that curve. Otherwise, it becomes less interesting to invest. Having control over your IP is essential at this stage, of course, as all the others. Especially, it's important to try to figure out what is unique for your company or your product. So an investor will look for that, trying to see if this can be easily copied by someone else. Does this company provide something unique that will actually, as Jane said, solve a painful problem, but also cannot be easily copied. And at this point, if not earlier, an investor is interested in knowing what the exit strategy is. Are the founders actually interested in selling this company or doing some other exit in the future? It could be a long time, but eventually an investor is going to want to get some of the funds back that they invested, or hopefully with a multiple on that. But it needs to be figured out and it needs to be presented, in my experience. So once we have secured funding, it's time to start growing the company in various ways. And in addition to just working with the product and making that a great well-selling product, there are other things that needs to happen as well. That wasn't obvious to me when we started. And that's developing relationships with partners that can help you sell your product, and potential acquirers, and other investors, or same investor, but certainly also other investors. And the reason you want to do this fairly early is that it takes time to build a good relationship and also build confidence in the company. If you suddenly need money, it's not going to be very helpful to call up some potential investors and try to get them to invest. But if they've known the company and followed the company for a year or two and see that you have been able to deliver on your promises and they know you and your team well, it's going to be much easier. And that's also true for a potential acquirer. It's really, really hard to just cold call someone and say, hey, I want to sell my company. We have another bid from another company. Are you interested? It's going to be a really uphill battle at that point. But if you have an established relationship with potential acquirers, it's going to be much easier. Then you have someone to call and you have a much faster startup of that process. Also, you need to market your product somehow. We've been trying to figure out where the market channels are. If it's bloggers, if it's trade shows, it used to be magazines. I don't think it is anymore. Today it's more influencers or thinkers in the market or in the segment you're working in. But it's really important to find those. We're trying to stay away from building consultancy businesses. We've really concentrated on building products or services. And the reason, there are several reasons for that, but one important is that in our experience, services does not add value in the same way as a product does. It's not the same sort of multiple. You can sell a product in many copies, but you can only sell a person in one copy, right? So we tried to stay away from services. We've tried to outsource services. In many cases, we have built products that require some services to use them or to install them or to support them and integrate them. And we have not taken that business. Instead, we have tried to concentrate on building the product, and we have left it to others. We have partnered with integrators and services firms and let them do that stuff. So we can concentrate on building the product and not have our developers distracted by doing services for our customers. It's really easy to get dragged into long projects with customers, and we're happy to give that business to someone else. We also found that after a while, it turns out that the product that we initially thought we were going to build wasn't exactly what the market needed, or the market for it wasn't as large as we originally thought. So we have been, at those points, prepared to change course a bit, build a slightly different product, or build another product that complements the one we've had. So you should be prepared for that, or at least contemplate that. It's not something we've been doing a lot, but we have done it a couple of times, just to get to market that has been larger and want to get a better prospect for the company. And we've been founding the companies with a number of engineers, and we've built the teams as we have been growing. We've built the teams around those engineers. So they've sort of become, in many ways, team leads for when we've been growing the company. So if everything goes really well and your product is successful, at some point, at least we have been looking for an exit. Or maybe not so much looking for an exit as having been approached by someone who wants to buy the company. And we've found that it's usually a good idea to wait for that before you start off a process where you invite other bidders for the company. We have been mostly aiming for tech sales, where we invent some technology, prove it in the market, and then sell the technology to someone who wants that and can explode the market for it. That was certainly the case with TailF, and having that in mind, it drives some of the decisions you make. So if the goal is to sell the company on the technology it has, not the number of customers or not the size of the profit, we found it easier to get good valuation for the company if the tech is really good, and because that's what we are really good at, building nice technology. But having that as a goal, it might be more important to build a relationship with a potential partner or potential acquirer of the company than it is to actually have a really large number of customers. So if you have to choose at some point, it might be better to prioritize a project with that, or put resources on a project that's done together with a potential acquirer, then it would be to maybe spend resources on other things. But to get to an exit, there are some things that really helpful. And one of them we've found is that if you can compete with a larger company that you think will acquire you or can acquire you, if you can grab business for them, if you compete with for the same business with that company and you manage to get the customer, that is a really good thing to gain their interest. It proves your technology, and it proves that it's so good that they're willing to buy from this really small company in competition with a large company. So that's really nice validation of your technology. As I said, it's really good to build relationships with potential acquirers from early on. And you preferably should have a relationship with some champion at the M&A department. And as a programmer, that's certainly not my expertise to do that, but we have brought on other people that are really good at doing that kind of marketing and approaching M&A people and building that relationship. But unless you have a champion at the M&A department or the senior VP or CTO at a potential acquirer, it's really going to be hard to get them engaged in a bidding situation for your company. There are investment banks that can help you create or sell your company, but they also have a lot easier time and can get a better valuation of your company if you have all these relationships to start with, or even if you just have one. But it takes time, so it needs to be done early on. It's way too late to start doing that when you get a bid from someone that you're tempted to accept. Then it's too late to essentially call someone else. You can try, but it's really hard to have someone get into that bidding situation. All right, so what do we think we have done right? I'm not sure this is the right answer, but this is what we think we have done right in the companies that we started. And as I said, there are many different ways to do that. But one of the things we've done right, I think, is that we have divided shares equally among all the founders. When we started, we started out by dividing all the shares, and then from that point, there turned out to be slight differences because people invested in some of the founders were able to invest either money or time. So maybe everyone didn't end up owning the same amount of shares, but at least everyone started with the same amount. And that has avoided a lot of conflict. We have also all started with the same salary. Usually everyone does not have the same salary when they jump on ship like this. I mean from where they're coming. But we have agreed to avoid conflict. We have all agreed to have the same salary if we are even going to take out any salary. But eventually we have done that. We have also always had a great trust for each other's competences and commitment. And what that means is that we have felt that we could rely on everyone doing their really best, and we know that they are all really good. So we have, of course, questioned everything in the company has always been sort of questioned and put into review and been up for discussion. But we have always had great respect for each other's competences. we try to have a really open environment where everything is up to discussion, and we have not been afraid to realize that we have been wrong in some decision or whatever. I think that's been really great. We also been eager to work with the customers, close to customers, the whole company. And when I came from Ericsson, it was the case that many of my colleagues had never even met a customer or heard about someone who's met a customer. And that doesn't really work in a startup, right? And we all enjoyed working with customers and getting to know the problem they have really close. As Jane described, that's really also one of the key requirements when you have a startup, that you get to learn the problem that the customers have. And in many cases, they have a solution as well, but that's not as interesting. Actually, it's usually not the right solution at all. But it's really interesting to get to know their problem and try to figure out what the right solution is. We have also always tried to provide fantastic support. So if you are a startup, you have to be really nice to the customers. They are betting on you that you will solve their problem, even though you are a small startup that could very well go away. So the least you can do is to provide really good support, and that will make the one that brought you into that company a champion of your stuff and promote you inside that company. And great support can also cover a lot of things that when things go wrong, you can actually turn that into a positive thing if you have great support and can solve the problem quickly. We have also always been let technology lead. I don't think we've ever sold anything that we hadn't already built, or at least were very certain that we could be delivered in a short time. I think that's been a strength. Also, we have not been in love with any specific technology. So we have thrown away things for sure. Erlang has stayed with us, mostly because it's been so great. We have used other languages. At one point at Tailf, we were asked to re-implement, or not as much that maybe. We were asked to build a new product, and we agreed to do it. We thought it was a great idea, but we perceived that the market wanted it to be built in Java. So we did that, and it turned out to be a big mistake because the product didn't fly, or we had a lot of problems with it. So we put it on the back burner for another 6 months, and then we made another attempt at solving the customer's problem, this time with Erlang, and had better success. But what I'm trying to get at is that we haven't sort of been in love with the technology, and we haven't pursued the technology in favor of solving the customer's problem. That's what I'm trying to say. It's easy to get in love with your technology and just spend all the time on that, and not look at what's actually solving customers' problem. What is sellable? What is the market looking for? And I think we've done that right. We have also tried to not make any difference between founders and employees. Once we've founded the company, we have become employees as everyone else in the company. And the governance has been done through the board. And we have even hired a CEO to run the company at times, because that was not our core competence. We have been good at various things, and we have tried to play to those strengths and then hire competences that we didn't have, and not been afraid to hire management and hire people that decide things in the company. We haven't felt that we had to decide everything just because we were the founders. I think that we have done that right. And doing it that way, I think, has resulted in a very flat organization. Because even if you try to avoid making any difference between founders and employees, it's really hard for someone to not listen to an engineer that's a founder. So that has helped us have a flat organization and having technology lead in a way. It's not going to fly if someone sells something that we're not going to build, or it's not buildable. That's just not. That has not been a good way to run things, we've thought. And we always also try to ask ourselves, what is the most important thing right now? Not necessarily follow the plan that we put down 6 months ago, but instead try to figure out what is most important right now to get this product to the customer, or to solve the problem for the customer. And what I mean by that we have asked what this defined problem is, that we have tried to understand what the actual problem is that the customer is having. In many cases, the customer comes with a solution, and especially if your product has been out there for a while, they think they understand what the product is, and they decide they need something specific in the product because they have some problem they need to solve, and they have the solution for doing it. And what we've really always tried to do is go back to the customer and ask him what is the problem you are actually trying to solve. And in many cases, we have been able to find a solution to their problem that also benefits other customers, and maybe is quite different from what they proposed. And also we have had peer reviews in a way of everything inside the company, which goes back to us having a very flat organization and being able to talk about all the decisions. We're being very open with what we're doing and what our plans are, and what are things like what is the budget for this, and which customers do we have, what sales have we made, and so on. Everyone has been involved in that, and we presented that very openly in the company. And it's been up to discussion. So even if it's a sales matter, it's not, and we haven't been afraid to talk about those things, even though it's not necessarily our expertise. Also, we have been respectful of the fact that life happens. Even if you start a company and you spend all your time trying to solve that, things are going to happen in your life. You kids are born, you get family issues, you get things happen, right? So we have tried to not count the number of hours everyone is working. It has been okay to have parental leave for 6 months. If you're going to work together for 10 years running a company, you have to make room for other things in your life as well. And I think that's been a strength. Of course, if you are a founder, you tend to take more responsibility maybe than you should. But we really try to make room for general life things. We also worked with long-term VCs that we had great relationships with over time. I think that's also been good. And we have tried to avoid customer VC branches. So sometimes customer that likes your product, they want to invest in the company. And the drawback with that, it might sound nice, and it's really good that they like your product so much that they want to invest in it, but it locks you into that customer a bit, and may make it harder to sell the company to their competitor. And they also may start to have insights into your company that you don't want them to have, or have ideas of what you should be doing. But this is not necessarily a hard rule. There are advantages, of course, to having one of the customer VCs as well. They could help you market your product and reach a larger customer base. So, but we've tried generally to stay away from that. There are many other things we have learned, but these are the things that I could have popped out of the head of my head when I tried to formulate what we had done right. I think that's about what I want to say. Maybe this might be useful if you're starting a company, or you can get inspiration from it at least.
Thank you very much, Johan. Very
You're welcome.
appreciated. Very appreciated. I will have the same question to you, but from the other end. Have you said no to capitalists coming and wanting to invest in your company?
Yes, for sure.
For what reason? They came with the wrong ideas, or you felt it wasn't working?
Well, for a number of different reasons. We have said no to customers, their VC branches, for sure. We have said no to if you run a startup that is at least partially successful, you'll get approached by VCs that want to invest in your company. And if that hasn't fit our plan, we've said no. But it's good to build a relationship with them anyway, because sometimes you end up needing money that you didn't think you would need. So we have sort of kept them on the back burner in most cases. We have not been we have tried to stay local in because we have worked really well with the investors we've had, so we haven't really looked for money outside that so much.
You talked a bit about shareholder agreement. I mean, that's interesting. Do you use lawyers?
Yes.
Yeah, you do that, yeah?
Yeah, we do. And when you enter agreement with a VC firm, it's going to be, say for the Series A round, they're going to look through all your contracts and do due diligence on your technology and all of that, and they're going to spend a lot of money on contracts, shareholder agreements with you and them. And in our experience, you need your own lawyers to represent you on that in that process. And also if you enter into an exit, it's a fairly long process to just work out all the contracts. Takes months. So you have to keep that in mind when you look for funding. You have to have at least 3 months just to get, even if you agree on the funding, it takes quite a while to get everything in order
paper.
and all the contracts and everything.
You said you started. This is another question that's not really related to starting up companies, but you said you started with Prog. Have you done anything since the 80s?
No, well, since the 90s. It was in the 90s I did a lot of Prog programming actually, and Prog abstract machine implementation and stuff. No, I haven't.
No. Then that's it. Thank you very much, Johan.
All right.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
And thanks for your great presentation. And also thank Jane again for her presentation. Yes. So I will continue to the end then. Schedule for the rest of the, it says schedule for the spring, but it's not really. It's scheduled for the autumn. We'll be back on 25th of August, and then we're aiming to run one meetup a month, and hopefully, if the restrictions light up or it gets easier, we can come back and have like physical meetings mixed with digital meetings in the autumn. We'll come back to that. Summary: if you want to present at the meetup, if you want to sponsor a meetup, feel free to contact me or connect with me on LinkedIn or other social platforms, or just contact me through the Meetup app. That's it. Thank you very much for watching tonight, and until next time, bye.